Tonight, dry run. Baseball bats, bear spray, and booby traps. Police storm into the hornet's nest, and the pro-Hamas types keep getting better. From Columbia to UCLA to Portland. As violence escalates, how bad will it get at the conventions in Chicago and Milwaukee? In a box. Students for and against Israel and Alabama unite around a common enemy.
We're a civil society, and order must prevail.
Even MSNBC says he's out of touch.
How do the Democrats, how do all of us on that side say January 6th was wrong if you can have the same pictures going on college campuses?
Silent majority.
Communism is based on stealing private property. That's what it is.
Bill O'Reilly on whether traditional values are making a comeback. And $400,000 kegger. University of North Carolina fraternity boys become national heroes for protecting Old Glory. John Rich offers to headline a concert while the internet raises $400,000 to say thank you in beer. Maybe Animal House is prophetic.
But we're not going to sit here and listen to you bad-mouth the United States of America. Gentlemen!
First tonight, how fraternity boys became heroes. They did it really by just saying no, seriously. Police arrested 2,000 protesters, wannabe terrorist sympathizers, anti-colonialist radicals around the country over the past couple of days. But something much more important than that happened this week. A group of fraternity boys had enough. They didn't get violent, they just stood there without masks. They didn't threaten anybody. And they just said enough. Happened at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. It also happened at Ole Miss. They surrounded the pro-Hamas types and started singing. This is video from UCLA. Nobody would tell the knuckleheads no. Seriously. A bunch of fraternity boys showed more moral courage than the presidents of Columbia, UCLA, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, maybe even the President of the United States. So we'll get to the wannabes later. But it's getting a little old talking about everything wrong with this small sliver of America's college constituency. So first, what America is really saying, and America spoke collectively. America's so fed up with people chanting about intifada, so fed up with nobody standing up for what's right, they donated nearly $500,000 to throw the greatest kegger for the fraternity boys of all time. Joining us a moment are some of the fraternity brothers who protected the American flag after the protesters tore it down. They got smiles. They're already planning the party. With us now, John Rich, country music star, who says he's going to play the party for free to celebrate the kids. John, it's good to see you. I don't know, in a way, after a week and a half of hearing the chants about intifada and everything else and covering what it means, it's nice to have a little hope.
Yeah, I think when you watch the news all the time, you can con yourself into believing that, man, every young person in America hates this country. Look at what they're doing on all these colleges. But that is not the truth at all. And when I saw the guys at UNC holding that flag up, making sure it did not hit the ground, it told me a lot about them. Number one, you're taught as a young man where I come from that the American flag is to never touch the ground under any circumstances. You put your body in front of it if you have to. Don't let it touch the ground. And number two, that they were willing to stand there and take that abuse and take people throwing stuff at them. They said, yeah, we're just not moving. This is the American flag. We're not moving. I was so inspired by that to see young people willing to stand up. And like you said, enough is enough, that I reached out and I said, boys, I sure am proud of you. When you have that big rager you guys are talking about on GoFundMe, I'd like to show up and play you a free concert. And they hit back, and I think we're going to try to make that happen.
Well, it's going to be one heck of a party and a concert. You called it Flag Stick, I think, on Twitter. You said a couple of things there. Enough is enough. Why is it, and moral courage comes in different times and in different places. This isn't a battlefield, but we're in a battle of ideas. Why do you think it is that it took some fraternity guys at the University of North Carolina, of all people, to be the ones to stand up? It's not the administration. It's certainly not the faculty at these schools. And it's certainly not, at least a lot of people, I think, on both sides in terms of politics.
Well, that's because America is not the government, okay? We've been told that the government, the president, the people in power, that they are America. They get to dictate the terms, and we just have to live with it. But there's this little thing they forgot about, Leland. It's called We the People, which is in all caps. And when you rile up We the People for long enough, and we've had enough, then We the People stand up. When I saw those guys holding that flag up, it reminded me of the story of when the Star-Spangled Banner was written. Francis Scott Key was sitting out there on a boat, and the British ships were cannonballing Fort McHenry with everything they had in 1814. And the reason the flag never fell was not because it was bolted down to the ground. It was because the dead bodies of our American ancestors were piled up against it. And they kept pushing the bodies up against that flag to make sure it did not come down. And, of course, we know we won that war. But that was the scene when the Star-Spangled Banner was written. So these young men tapped into that kind of a spirit in this country, and that's what we need everybody to tap back into. I hope that these guys inspire colleges and young patriots all across the country to do the exact same thing. We're going to call the show Flagstock, like Woodstock, but Flagstock. It's going to be an absolute blast, man. My phone has not stopped blowing up from artists telling me, hey, when that show happens, you better call because I'm going to be there.
That's really cool. And look, country music's the ballad of life. It's the ballad of traditional America. I want to bring in the boys here in a second. Zachary Sarinsky, Brendan Rosenblum, Trevor Land, the guys who are in that video. Brendan, we had you yesterday. Start with Zachary real quick. You guys just did what you thought was the right thing all of a sudden. Are you surprised by the result?
I'm not. First of all, thank you for having us. We're all happy to be here. When we saw our brothers there defending that flag, there was no doubt in any of our minds that we were going to go and join them. I'm glad that it was able to be put to an end the way that it did eventually. But yeah, we were there defending our brothers, and there wasn't going to be anything that was going to stop us from going to that flag. All
right, but Trevor, think about this, right? Okay, a couple days ago, you guys did the right thing. You weren't doing it for fame or for glory. You were doing it because you thought it was the right thing to do. You were there with your brothers who were taking a stand, and now you're on TV with John Rich, who's going to play you a concert with $400,000 worth of free beer. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can all agree that we didn't anticipate that part of it would occur, but we did know that it's important to stand strong in our beliefs and to be a representation of what we hope to see for Jewish students and for students who believe in our flag and democracy across the country.
Yeah. Brendan, tell me what's happened in the past 24 hours, some of the conversations you've had.
Yeah, I think, first of all, we definitely got a lot more media attention. And for us, it's not about fame. It's not about coolness. It's about bringing attention to our message. Stand up for what you believe in. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. For me, it's when your values are questioned, that's when it matters. It's easy to believe in something when it's easy. But when people question that, that's when it's important to stand by them.
John, over this past summer, country music came under assault, right? And then the market spoke, and country music songs went to number one, not only in the country charts, but on the Billboard charts in general, because there was something about the words in country music that struck not just with rednecks, not just with dark red Republicans, but something about traditional value Americans. It's not left or right. It was about values. How's that changing music a little bit?
Well, I think we are inundated these days, and I'm sure the young men would agree with this. We're inundated with all of this racket and chaos and negativity and spin and narrative, and we're caught in the middle of this soup. And so when you put out a straight-ahead country song, for instance, that just speaks the truth, man, people resonate with that. They're like, finally, somebody's not playing a game with me. They're actually saying the truth, and it's in a song. I think I like this song. I think I like that artist. I can tell you that the shows on the road this year are bigger than they have ever been. We sing God Bless America at every big and rich show. We had 42,000 people at a show in Louisiana about 3 weeks ago, and the whole place sang God Bless America at the top of their lungs. So I believe America is alive and well. These young men are testament to that. And boys, I just want to tell you this. I hope that other people like yourself at other universities across this country do what you did and do it exactly how you did it. You handled it absolutely perfectly, and you made us all very, very proud.
Yeah, well, now we've got, we did the numbers on this. Now, I don't know what kind of bougie beer you guys drink at UNC, but we have various kinds of beer that we enjoyed. Miller High Life was my fraternity's. How much beer can you buy with $550,000? $129.99 each. There's an irony here that we decided for this graphic to choose Bud Light as our beer of choice for this. That's 3,500 kegs of beer. I know UNC fellows can party, but have you guys given any thought, Brennan, to what you might do with this money? Other than just throw a rager?
Yeah, I think I just want to start out by saying we appreciate the support and we appreciate everyone giving the money they have. Unfortunately, we don't have direct control over that money. The fund wasn't created by someone in the fraternity, so we don't really know where that money is going to go right now. But I think it's important that people felt strongly enough to give us that and to donate to a cause that they believe in. So,
have you guys gotten? I'm wondering, because everybody has been talking about what should happen to the protesters, and there's been a big move so that they, don't get jobs, or there's talk of them being expelled from school and everything else. You guys have been public about this, right? And I'm wondering what the response has been for you guys. Have you guys been offered jobs, internships? Have you been harassed a lot? What's happened?
I think there's been a lot of outreach. There's definitely been job opportunities, but again, that's not what this was about. It was just to bring attention to the issue we believe in. And I think the biggest thing we saw from this is people are talking about it. People are talking to both sides about it and trying to have constructive dialogue because they realize that what happened on our campus is not okay. And we have to figure out a way to move forward together. And that's the biggest and most positive thing that came out of this. And I think that's something that we both and everyone there can be proud of.
I don't know, John, I'm not a musician, but I feel there could be perhaps a song written about this situation.
There could be. Once we pick this date and figure out when we're going to do this, we may have to write a specific song about it. But I will tell you guys, the greatest generation, that would be your great-grandparents probably. And you wonder why they call them that, the greatest generation. It's because they were about your age when World War II broke out, and they all stand up and they all went to work back at home. Every man, woman, and child pulled for the flag, and we beat Germany and Japan and Mussolini all at the same time. And it's been a long time since I've seen young people do what you guys did and remind us whose shoulders we stand on. And again, very proud of you guys for what you've done.
Fellas, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege. My father called me this morning and told me that he had read, based on what you guys did, the letter of Sullivan Ballou, who was a volunteer in the 2nd Rhode Island Infantry, died at Bull Run. And he wrote to his wife right before he died in battle. I know how strongly American civilization now leans upon the triumph of the government, how great a debt we owe to those who went before through the blood and suffering of the revolution. And I'm willing, perfectly willing, to lay down all my joys in this life to help maintain this government and to pay that debt. And John, I'm thinking that in so much of America now, there is a hope that there's people like these young men, and that these men give hope, that there's people who still believe in the values we all believe in.
They're out there. I mean, we see them at our shows. You just saw it with these guys. I'm telling you, you're going to see other people. You just saw it at Ole Miss about 2 hours ago. I saw that posted. They're out there singing the Star Spangled Banner out on their campus. I think this is going to catch fire and go all across the country. Think about what young people must be thinking right now, what these gentlemen here must be thinking, looking at our economy, looking at our border, looking at their future and going, man, how is this going to work out? I mean, this is rough. Look, and they're in debt at college. I mean, it's a lot to look at. So if there was ever a time for young people to stand up and grab this horse by the reins and get it back on the road, it's right now. And I hope they do it by the tens of millions.
Look, what you guys did took a lot of courage, especially to be the very first ones. It's not always that you find courage on a battlefield. Sometimes you find it on the quad at schools. Fellas, thank you very much for being with us. John, we appreciate it. We're coming down when you do this concert, all right? We're coming down to be with you.
Sounds good.
All right. Fellas, thank you very much. John,
thank
you
you
as
so
well.
Much, Leland.
All right, thanks. Maybe these kids are onto something. You can stick up for America. It's okay. But Republicans so badly want to make this political. Maybe it is about something bigger. At George Washington University in D.C., the statue of George Washington now wears a keffiyeh. Bill O'Reilly's with us. If things really are changing in America. Former President Trump made another unannounced stop after his court date today. He brought pizza to New York City police and firefighters. He previously met with construction workers and Latino convenience store owners, all part of a plan to paint Republicans as the party of the working class. He made a similar pitch in Wisconsin this week.
You know what I say about the party? It's become, with me running it, it's become the party of common sense. Our party, it's the party of common sense. You know, they say, is it conservative? Is it? It is. It's conservative. It's just common sense.
All right, Bill O'Reilly's here, host of the No Spin News, author of the coming book, Confronting the President's No Spin Assessments from Washington to Biden. Is it really the party of common sense, or is there just a group of people in America who want common sense and many are still skeptical of Donald Trump and Republicans?
I think right now in history, the Democratic Party is different than it used to be because the power brokers are progressives, and that's far left people. The people calling the shots in the party are different than they used to be. It's not Daniel Patrick Moynihan anymore. It's not JFK or even Robert Kennedy. It's people that are pretty far out there in their desire to change everything about America. That's number one. So the Democratic Party has changed, and Joe Biden is 100% with that crew. So the Republican Party then veers into territory of moderation in the sense that there are a lot of traditional Americans, not conservatives, who don't want that drastic change. They don't want a criminal justice system that gives violent crime a pass. They don't want, all right, skyrocketing prices on a global warming theory. They don't want millions of foreign nationals pouring into the United States unattended. These aren't conservatives. These are just regular folks. So they're gravitating toward the Republican Party. And that's what you're seeing. I don't know about common sense. I don't see a lot of common sense from Marjorie Taylor Greene or what's his name in Florida, you know, the congressman. I don't see a lot of common sense there. Yeah, I mean, so I generally speaking, I know the flow of moderate traditional Americans is to the grand old party, the GOP.
All right, so Trump there says under his direction, this is what it's become. And you saw him talking to New York firefighters and New York cops. And this is a guy who was part of the New York elite. You don't need me to tell you that. You knew him for a long time when he was in New York. We're talking about the day's events, right? So you've got the riots at UCLA. You had the riots at Columbia. And the Columbia Law School Law Journal just put out a statement saying there shouldn't be final exams because they've been too traumatized. But Donald Trump is part of the same system, right? Okay, that he's going to go bank with the banks that hire all these kids. He's going to go hire lawyers from the law firms that hire all these kids. For working class families who are living under the thumb of this and what has been brought on by elite America, progressive America, Donald Trump's not going to tear that down for them.
I don't know what Trump will do or not do in the general arena. I do know, Leland, you should read my book, The United States of Trump, over the weekend. Trump was never accepted by the New York elite. They always considered him a vulgarian. They might have smiled to his face because he was wealthy and building a lot of buildings, but they never accepted him. He was never in that crew. He was never in the Vanity Fair, Vogue magazine squad, ever. They always despised him because of his roots. Queens, Fred Trump, all of this I get into in the United States of Trump. As far as Columbia University, that's supposed to be the elite, one of the Ivies, right? Well, we now find out that there is no discipline, no leadership, no point of view from the university at all. What do they stand for? Let me ask you that, Leland. You're a smart guy. What does Columbia University stand for? Can you tell me?
No, I think that's the point, right? No one can understand what they can stand for. They understand what they allow.
They don't stand for anything.
No, but we see what they allow,
but they don't
and that says a lot.
stand for anything.
Okay.
You know, if you stand for something, then you come out and say it. Like the president of the University of Florida, Ben Sasse, says on day 2, we respect protest, but if you break the law or the rules of the University of Florida, you're expelled.
Right.
So he stands for order, O-R-D-E-R. We got it. And you can go to Gainesville or not. Columbia and most of the other Ivies don't stand for anything. They'll tell you they stand for DEI and inclusion and they're woke. Yeah, but they don't really stand for anything. When it really comes down to it, they're not going to be in a foxhole.
Right, but I'll flip that around. Is Donald Trump really going to be in a foxhole fighting against them?
I don't know if he'll take the time to fight against academia. I would probably say no. Trump is a deal maker. If he wins, he'll get in there and do exactly what he did the first time around. He'll make deals with Putin, deals with Xi, deals with the energy companies in America. He'll close the border down. He'll tell Mexico, you better stop it, or we're going to hit you economically and put you into a depression. That's what Trump will do, rather than the academic stuff, which he does not care about at all.
All right. Fair enough. Bill, it's always good to see you. Thank you. All right. Donald Trump says you can't be Jewish and a Democrat or working class and a Democrat. And maybe that's the point, right? The problem isn't the message, hard to argue with, is the messenger the problem when we come back.
There is no place for hate speech or violence of any kind, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or discrimination against Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans.
For decades, the Democratic Party enjoyed unquestioned support from American Jews, both in votes that, depending on which state they were in, didn't really matter that much for the presidential election, but perhaps much more importantly, Jews donated a lot of money to Democrats exclusively, but not anymore.
Well, we're doing very well with the Jewish voter, it looks like, and we should do very well. If you look at all of our presidents, they're saying Trump was the best for Israel.
Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion, they hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Any Jewish person that votes for a Democrat or votes for Biden should have their head examined.
Opinion editor and author of Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women, Batchandra Sargon, is here. I don't think I've ever seen you chuckle like that before. Host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast, syndicated Chris Hahn radio show, NewsNation political contributor Chris Hahn is with us. Thank you. Welcome. All right. I'm going to ask the taboo question, right? Okay. How, after what the Democratic Party has done on Israel and especially on these protests, how can any Jew support Democrats.
Well,
right now.
I'm half Jewish. My grandparents survived the Holocaust.
Yep.
And
hence why you were selected for this panel.
Oh, yeah. You know that about me. We've talked about this. I think the Democratic Party has been very good on Jewish issues. The number one person in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, my former boss, is himself a Jew.
Right. By the way, who is shockingly silent about everything that happened at Columbia and the things that were being said.
I mean, I don't think it's the job of the U.S. Senate and the President of the United States to determine policies at Columbia University. And when the city of New York got involved, it was over immediately. And I don't think they handled it well up there. I don't think anti-Semitism is free speech. I don't think, yelling at students who are walking by who are not participating in protests is free speech. But I also don't think it's the job of Congress to get involved. I thought when the Speaker of the House and even when the Democrats went up there, it was kind of pandering for the cameras.
Come on. Chris, you and I both know that during BLM, every Democratic politician could not wait to talk about the protests and about how important they were and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And by the way, after January 6th, every Democrat couldn't wait to condemn.
Well, January 6th was something that should be condemned because it was a political action taken
and what happened at Columbia should be
direction. Students protest. And students sometimes don't say the right things, and sometimes they say something that are completely stupid and uneducated. It makes me question the money that they're paying to go to Columbia when they're chanting Intifada and from the river to the sea.
I've never seen you chuckle or be as quiet in a conversation as this one.
I think I told her off camera. Be funny. Don't try to win the war.
I'm sorry. Donald Trump is very funny.
He is funny.
Especially funny when he's saying something that you can tell on his face he knows he shouldn't be saying, right?
Right.
A lot of Jews are saying this amongst themselves at the Shabbat meal, at the Shabbat table, arguing about, which side really has our best interests at heart. It's a totally different matter for Trump to come out and just say it, right? I will say that to me, I'm a little bit closer, I think, to Chris's position, which is that I don't think that this is really about Jews and about Israel. I think this is about the class divide. The Democratic Party is now the party of the over-credentialed college elites and the dependent poor. And if you are in one of those groups, which is where a lot of Jews find themselves, right? You have a lot of very poor Hasidic Jews and then, a lot of very educated Jews. That is where your economic interests are. And so, of course, you're going to keep voting for those people. If you are a working class Jew, on the other hand, of course, you're going to find yourself voting for Donald Trump because that is where the trend of the working class is going.
As a half Jew with a JD, I think President Biden has done a great job on Israel. He stood up for them. I can't wait to hear what he says next week when he goes to the Holocaust Museum and addresses the anti-Semitism that's been on the rise in this country.
Well, can I just make a point about that, which is that he's waffled on Israel, so I don't agree with that. However, very few Americans, including very few American Jews, vote on foreign policy and vote on Israel. And that is very important to point out. Israel policy is something that a lot of Christians feel very strongly about, and a lot of Jews...
Right, but hold on. Before right now, and maybe to a little bit of an extent in 2012 with Obama, foreign policies related to Israel was bipartisan in America. It was sacrosanct. There was never a discussion about limiting aid. There was never a discussion about trying to, you're going to take issue with this, but handcuff the Israeli military when they're defending themselves. That wasn't ever a partisan issue. It is now. So does that not change the calculus?
I do not believe we should be handcuffing the Israeli military. I don't think President Biden has handcuffed the Israeli military. I do think that there are some humanitarian issues that should be addressed there, and I think that anybody that sees what's going on there would be concerned about that too. And as democracies, we should be better when we're going into places and to try to take care of the civilians there. That said, look, the protests that are going around right now, I'm on a board of a university. I saw some protests at my university. To me, you're saying divest. Well, get rid of your cell phone that was made in China if you're so concerned about human rights and violations that are going on there. I don't understand the disconnect that people don't that people don't see that Israel is our greatest ally in that region. Will always.
So explain the disconnect.
No,
explain the disconnect of why all these kids are choosing to talk about Israel. No, all the kids in these protests are choosing to talk about Intifada and everything else, and not about the fact that the Uyghurs who made Chris Han's iPhone did so in a slave labor camp in China.
They
Only
hate
your iPhone.
Israel because they hate America, and they see Israel as an extension of America, and they see American Jews as an extension of what we all know to be everything that works about this country, and to them, everything that's terrible about it. This is not really about anti-Semitism, although, of course, they are deeply anti-Semitic. It is about a hatred of America and a hatred of the values that this country was founded
well, I guess just to tie that all the way up, right? When you in any time there is sort of major social change of a group hating a group, right? The Jews always come first.
Always.
Right.
Always.
So first they come for the Jews. It's how the Nazis did and everybody else.
Always.
Well, except in America, when anti-black racism was the norm, and as was anti-Semitism. In the 50s,
I know that Trump's running around with this and trying to attract Jewish voters for it. Where was he after Charlottesville? He brought it up, not me. Okay. And
Joe Biden is the one. Joe Biden's press secretary is the one who would talk about Charlottesville even 2 days ago, but not talk about the protests.
Well, I'm sorry. Donald Trump raised it. He raised it first. A week and a half ago. He went out in front of that courthouse and said, this makes Charlottesville look like whatever. But that's, Charlottesville was a dark moment in this country, too, and I didn't see a lot of conservatives attacking him, right? So conservatives love to attack, protests that they view as progressive.
Somehow we got way far away from the issue that this started with. Yeah. Don't quit your day job. MSNBC,
This is my day job.
yeah. Improv's not your day job. MSNBC just issued a dire warning to Joe Biden. Interesting question here. Does that mean he's doing something right?
Before October 7th, there was almost no one in Congress, except a few members of the squad who supported conditioning military aid. The national protests have now making that a mainstream Democratic position.
Last weekend, the White House Correspondents Association practically threw a Biden rally as they celebrated him and thanking him for saving democracy and allegedly giving access to the press that he doesn't give access to. But that makes what I'm about to show you even more important, even more surprising, even more telling. Here's MSNBC, of all people, issuing, over the past 24 hours, some dire warnings to Joe Biden.
If you're offended by this, please, I'm trying to help you. I don't want Donald Trump to get elected, all right?
There you go.
Trying to help you. If you're too stupid to figure that out, you change to another channel.
For people who are not familiar with the Columbia campus, in April of 1968, 56 years ago, hundreds of students seized the building during protest over the Vietnam War. I do not think that was lost to the people who stormed Hamilton Hall. After a week, this is again in 1968, police entered through underground tunnels and cleared them out. Over 700 people were arrested.
All right. Founding editor of Mediaite, NewsNation contributor Colby Hall with us on set. I know we were both really surprised by this. I'm wondering, in the way I look at it, is the next step for MSNBC, which he watches Morning Joe religiously, starting to tell him maybe at the convention it's time to give somebody else a chance?
Well, I tell you, it's been a tough news cycle for Biden, especially when you've lost MSNBC. And I'm not saying he's lost MSNBC, but you raise a great point. If this is all pretext to, a brokered convention in which, suddenly Gavin Newsom shows up, that makes way more sense than a network that's all in on Biden and whose ratings are flagging and poll numbers are flagging. That calculus is not working for either the network, left-leaning media in general, or Joe Biden. And so a transcendent moment needs to come. Is it a brokered convention? Or is it,
You say brokered convention, but it kind of goes to a different point, right? Remember 1968, Lyndon Johnson's famously quoted, but did not say, when you've lost Walter Cronkite, you've lost middle America,
100%.
right? Okay, so that may be when you've lost MSNBC, you've lost the Democratic Party. But interesting thing happened at the University of Alabama. There were two very peaceful protests, one pro-Palestine, one pro-Israel, but the groups united in chanting one thing. Okay, take a listen. How do you cover that?
I think the way that you just did. I think you be fact-based. You show the footage and you let it speak for yourself, and the analysis is also fact-based. When you have, Joe Scarborough and Morning Joe, largely influential in the New York, D.C. media set, they are openly campaigning for Biden. It's effectively, Fox News was criticized for being state-run TV under Trump. It's not any different now under MSNBC, especially with Morning Joe. And when he's calling viewers who are angry at protesters too stupid to understand that their protests are hurting Biden, as though the only lens that he can see these things through is a purely partisan one, and that he speaks regularly to Joe Biden on the phone, well, to me, that feels like he's lost his, his mooring.
Right. Okay. So I'll give you the last 30 seconds. If he speaks to Joe Biden regularly on the phone, typically you say things in private before you say them in public to everybody. It has to be the reason that Joe Biden came out today and spoke.
Well, it certainly seems as though, like, out of the blue, it seemed improvised. There was no planning. And
no, it was like 10 o'clock. Hey, 9:30, there was nothing on the president's schedule. 10 o'clock, he's going to speak in 30 minutes.
Exactly right. And what he said was sort of the bare minimum. I mean, it was good what he said, but they were the bare minimum bromides. He didn't take any questions. It felt like a placeholder. I said this thing, I did this thing, let's turn the page. Well, guess what? America's not ready to turn the page. And there's a long way to go until November, but it's not trending anyway the way that the Biden administration wants it to be trending.
Well, and it may not through the summer.
And I don't
think about the parallels to 68. We got to run.
Good night.
Right, good to see you. You might call all these college riots a dry run. Same groups, same grievances. Well, they all hate Joe Biden. We've established that. They'll all be at the DNC in Chicago. Remember the DNC in 68 in Chicago? What the cops are learning about their tactics, more importantly, what the protesters are learning about the cops.
I got her.
Police intelligence services are studying the video you just watched frame by frame. Video from UCLA, Portland, New York City, as police went in and grabbed all of these pro-Hamas protesters on college campuses. In some cases, the protesters had days to build all of these fortifications. We've seen similar scenes across the country. UT Austin, UW-Madison, Dartmouth, and Emory University in Georgia. As Mark Twain would say, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, does rhyme. So a lot of the video we've been seeing of these clashes, they look very similar to UC Berkeley in 1969. The campus in protest over the Vietnam War, that is until Governor Ronald Reagan shut it down with the National Guard. Also looks pretty similar to 1968, the clashes at the convention in Chicago. In 2004, Iraq war protesters took over the streets of New York City. This was timed with the start of the Republican National Convention. Former New York Police Commissioner Ray Kelly is with us. He dealt with that in 2004. You almost look at this as a dry run, right, for the protesters and for the police. Everybody's sort of feeling each other out, tactics, that kind of thing. Who benefits more, the cops who are able to get intel on the tactics or the protesters who are able to figure out just what the rules of engagement are?
I don't think it's that complicated, quite frankly. I don't think there's a lot of subterfuge or things. They're going to, I think, attempt to sort of tie up things, not necessarily now on campus, but probably close to the campus. The police, hopefully, have been watching some of these groups closely. It's perfectly legitimate for them to do that. So, I mean, there's not a lot of sophisticated tactics that are going to be used on either side, quite frankly. I think what benefits New York City is the size of the department. You saw in Los Angeles, the police look a little bit challenged because they don't have enough cops there. LA is a significantly smaller police department. LA is a smaller city, but also the police department is quite small. So they had to use 3 police departments, Highway Patrol, Sheriff's Office, and LA Police. In New York City, you saw perhaps as many as 2,000 police officers at Columbia and CCNY. And that had a very, I think, chilling effect on the demonstrators or any desire to confront the police. So, they went along peacefully. There was no confrontation that I'm aware of. So, are we going to see more of this? I think we're going to see more demonstrations. I don't think necessarily they're going to be violent, but we're going to see this is not going to end with these arrests.
You think about, especially LA, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the protesters, if you want to call them that, had a lot. They had bottles filled with bodily fluids, not to be too descriptive. They had bottles filled with cement. They were bear spraying the officers. There was a lot of violence. There were baseball bats with nails coming out of them. They meant to do harm. What'd you make of how slow and methodical the movements were? That there wasn't this sort of like desire to really use overwhelming force and end this. They went very slowly. They were negotiating on and on and on. It seems as though that would embolden the protesters a little bit.
I agree. I think you have to move quickly. I saw really pitched battles, as they would describe, between pro-Israeli and pro-Hamas demonstrators. That went on for a couple of hours. You don't need an invitation from the school to go on to campus and address that issue. So I just don't know how that happened. But as a general rule, you got to act quickly in these things because they fester, they build. They had a lot of apparently sophisticated equipment and means, lots of plywood. How do they get that
it was
campus?
coming in. No, it was the plywood was coming in, the flashlights with batteries were coming in, the gloves, the helmets, all that stuff. Commissioner Kelly, thank you. We appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've written a lot about the protests in War Notes, warnotes.com to subscribe. It is our free daily newsletter. Comes out every day at 4 p.m. Eastern. It gives you our most important thoughts on the day's news. You can subscribe at warnotes.com, at Leland Vittert on Instagram or Twitter. There's a link on War Notes right now if you want to help donate to the fraternities. I think they're going to put that money to good use. And they were all the fraternity brothers at the University of North Carolina who, for the first time, it wasn't the police, it wasn't the politicians, it wasn't even the universities. It was a bunch of kids who all stood up and did the right thing. They protected the flag, and now they have set a national trend for this. What's very interesting, what makes them so different about what happened at the University of North Carolina, what happened at Ole Miss. We haven't seen this now in a couple of weeks. But when you look at the video versus the protesters, none of them were wearing masks. The protesters are all wearing masks. If someone's willing to say it and not cover their face, they're worth paying attention to. Here's Chris.
Hey, I'm Chris Cuomo. Look, the idea that everybody is using these protests to serve their own agendas, it's true, and I know it resonates with you, and it bothers you, and it should, because here's why. This isn't just another situation that we can use as a political football. Now, that's what's being done. It's being done in the media, it's being done everywhere, but it's a huge mistake, and I can prove it. We are missing the big threat that these protests represent. Protests represent. Protests represent. Protests represent. Protests represent. Protests represent.